Welcome to my first presentation, and let me preface this presentation by saying that if you're a iPhone, Steve Jobs worshiping, app hoarding millennial whose parents still pay all your bills and you care nothing about your privacy, this program and actually this whole channel is really not for you. As you can see, I'm not a millennial, I'm an old man. And you know, that's the problem. Anyway, I'll get to the point. The title of this program is How to Avoid Android Operating System Bloatware, which I really discovered by accident. The answer, you know, because most programs like to hold it out till the very end, and I'm actually turning this into two programs, two separate sections, because I know it's, although YouTube is no longer does the 15-minute limit, I know it may take a lot longer, because sometimes it helps to understand my thinking, what I'm up to. But the answer to the question as and how to prevent, you know, your loss of privacy and the destruction of your cell phone is simple. Motorola, and it's beginning with Motorola E4. Before I proceed, I'm going to go ahead and give you my history with cell phones and what I've had to deal with, and the fact of, you know, because there's nothing like having to deal with problem solving, so that you really learn, so that you don't become subject to the BS artists, you know, like at Apple. And before I go and proceed even on that part of the story there, I want to remind you that as of this filming, you know, you already know that Apple stock has plummeted. Their sales have been flat for 3 years, and you idiots are out there paying now $1,000 to $1,800 plus, $2,000 in other countries, and actually in two of the largest markets for an Apple iPhone, which Apple has. You can check with Louis Rossman between their laptops and their cell phones, and I can tell you myself, because I've been taking apart every kind of electronics for more than 61, 62, 63 years. Every piece of so, you know, just to remind you that, you know, you people that are app hoarders, don't care anything about your privacy, this is not for you. This program, and probably the one that will be a continuation of it, is all about trying to maintain your privacy. As a matter of fact, today, Google lost $170 million. Oh, that only leaves them $99.83 billion in cash on hand. Oh, yeah, that really hurt them. Oh, sure. They had to pay a $170 million fine for invading children's privacy. You know, the Google Android alphabet monopoly is facing a huge antitrust suit. But really right now I want to tell you about my personal experiences. I actually thought it was 12 years ago, 2007, that I got my first cell phone. I've been real resistant to cell phones because, for those of you who don't remember, when cell phones came out, you paid by the minute, and I had many students and was around a lot of young people who played this game where they would give their cell phone number to everybody. Oh, they just had to show off they had a cell phone. This is back in the days when they were mostly flip phones and so on. I used to be with many of my young college friends at, like at University of Texas and so on. And actually watch them. They would answer the phone. They go, "Oh, hi, Karen, whatever, yada yada," and then all of a sudden they had it set to shut off and flip. Right when they knew it'd be less than a minute, they'd flip it, and then when they get home, they'd call them on their landline and explain, "Oh, I'm sorry, we lost signal." Okay. So anyway, it wasn't until I was asked to consult on a cancer case, super easy, and also there was a issue with, there was this beautiful young Jewish girl in Boston who had fallen in love with me over just a 6 or 8 hour period, and I had told her no, that she was obviously independently wealthy and stuff like that, and I told her, no, you can't come with me. I need to, when I get to Maine, I need to rest. It's, I really just can't really, I told her, just wait, and I'll tell her when you're going to come up. But when I got up to central Maine, I called to my home, checked my voicemail and stuff like that on my home landline, and I was getting these desperate calls from a guy that I hadn't met. He had gone on to, he was in Nova Scotia to marry a German woman. And then I found actually silent recordings from the girl in Boston and stuff like that. And I said, I've got to get it. So I went to the Family Dollar, and, because I'm not, right off the bat, I'm a kind of guy that's, the reason that I usually always have money in the bank is because I'm tight with money. I'm never in debt. It's against the religion of my people to be in debt. So it's the quick explanation. I'm not stupid. I know, and I remember this is what really, why this sticks in my mind is this first year of owning a. So I went to the dollar store, and knowing a little bit, because I had one classmate that retired from Qualcomm, and I saw that all their Net 10 phones, where every one of them were 18 except for one, a Kia Sarah that was a 3G, which at that time 3G was as high as you could go. And that was the limit. It was third generation 10 years ago, 10 years and 3 months ago. And I could clearly see it marked on the side. It was 3G CDMA. I know the difference. Most of y'all still don't know the difference between CDMA and GMS. 3D CDMA by Qualcomm. Boom, right there. And I noticed that all the people that had that was the year they had the first functional BlackBerry where you didn't have to have a headset. You could actually, I was around people all the time that couldn't even call home, and I'd hand them my little, I know it cost 40 cents to manufacture that Kia Sarah. Those of you, actually I've used this in even my own scientific work. If you think that the price tag of something, equates to the quality of that product, you're an idiot. What you have to do is you have to learn about products and the cost of manufacture of goods, and it's up to you to determine whether that price tag is worth it. But those of you who insist on status symbols, one of the things that I find really amusing is that sometimes the poorest people, the people that have the least money, they're $80,000 to $100,000 in debt, going bankruptcy every 7 years, but they got the Dolce & Gabbana, and they got the Givenchy, they got the Yves Saint Laurent, they got all this. They have such low self-esteem that they have to cover themselves like billboards, advertising for for designer stuff, which is what Apple does. I mean, Apple's always got that highly visible. So anyway, the problem was right then I discovered was the difference in carriers, and it was on Verizon, and I'm stuck with Verizon. I've been with they're the best carrier, and it's amazing how many. But when I came back home, I very quickly found out with the little research that at that point in time there were 24 towers with a fairly limited set of transceivers around here, and they were all owned by AT&T. So I dropped from like 4 bars down to 1. Had terrible reception. Really didn't need a smartphone. Finally bought my first smartphone and stuff. It was an LG or Samsung. And then I got into a conflict with an old classmate of mine, and and discovered that this a-hole had a 4 kilobyte virus that could kill any mobile phone chip. He destroyed the first smartphone that I bought just in no time. And then I went down to, to flat phones or flip phones that had very limited memory, which I would keep clear. I just would, I might take a picture, transmit it, to either my Facebook page or something like that, or to a friend, and then erase it. So that, several times a day, I'd keep looking for that 4 kilobytes extra. On these newer phones, you can't trace it down to the kilobits. These real huge memories, and so, and that person, so for several years, because AT&T, had a monopoly in this area, Verizon hadn't started building their own towers and making contracts with AT&T to put their own transceivers on AT&T towers, etc. It wasn't until then I decided to start, buying better phones. And actually, that's when I went to, had been using Samsung, LG's, my first 3G LG phone that functioned well and stuff. I could actually start watching YouTube videos with very little buffering and stuff. That was only because Verizon finally overcame, there was few areas of this country that were still, at that time, monopolized by AT&T. So, at the end, kind of the end of the life of that smartphone, that's when I discovered a phone that I truly just fell in love with. This is the second generation. You'll notice that the phones that I'm holding up are almost identical to the phones that I'm using right now. This is the Moto E second generation, of which I've actually owned 3 of them over almost a 3-year period. The first one I took apart, and it really has a lot of good, it's almost completely water resistant and everything. It even comes with a bumper guard on it here, and it's completely sealed. Actually, when I went to disassemble the oldest one, the first one, because I wanted to see, actually I should have mentioned that it's only with my first phone, the Kia Sarah, that I ever saw swollen battery syndrome. It was because of my heavy usage of it. I was actually financially supporting a woman in Maine who later turned into a complete thug. She actually had, it's funny, I think that was the first year, the first iPhone and the first functional BlackBerry. It was 10 years ago. And I love these things. They're just indestructible. You could literally kill somebody with one of these things and walk away. They're sealed. They have a lip on here, which actually when I was disassembling the first one, I'll just use this one as a, when I was disassembling the first one, I quickly realized that I could have just used a hot knife or hot blade to cut off this outer lip and seal, but I decided to do it the hardest way. It took me 2 hours to peel this case off and completely disassemble this thing, and you can't disassemble it without destroying it. They had laminated. I couldn't even read they'd begin to cover all critical parts with a metal shield and stuff like that, and the actual circuitry was laminated over to protect from the heat of the battery. See, this is Texas. I operate in temperatures that your phones, you people can't, handle and stuff like that. The maximum operating temperature on all cell phones is around 95 degrees. They start to get real funky at below 35 degrees. And I'm in situations where that's not happening. And by the way, I got to check my time, and I always get the clock hidden behind I'm going to have to end this one right here. This is end of part 1. Part 2 coming up immediately.